The college football bowl season begins on Saturday with the New Orleans Bowl, and we're going to take a look at that game and all the other games on Saturday, including the key games throughout the bowl season, and the players also to keep an eye on as we go one-on-one with Chris Dufresne, national college football writer for the media guides at tmgcollegesports.com, on the OFN meeting room with Greg DePalma. All right, it's December 15th, 2017. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning into the OFN meeting room as we talk college football with Chris Dufresne. First time, Chris, thanks for taking the time out today to talk to us.
Well, thanks for having me, and I love your bumper music too. You know.
Oh, awesome.
Muse, right? I mean, I think that's
yes,
Muse.
Musing, correct. I'm surprised you know that.
Hey, you know what? I got kids.
That's right. Muse from Uprising. That's the name of the.
That.
That's the name of the song. All right. So let's first, since this is your first time, talk a little bit about. Now you were with before you founded the website. You were with the LA Times for about what, 10 years?
10. Yeah, if I wish. No.
30.
30. 10, 30. Actually, 34 and a half years.
34 and a half years. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I actually started at the paper when I was 18 years old. So I'm not as old as that sounds. And I started as a truck loader, literally on the docks of the LA Times.
That's cool.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool story. And then worked my way up. My dad was a truck driver there, so he got, I loaded trucks while I was going to school, and then got my degree, and then ended up, and then I'm starting as a copy boy, and the rest is whatever history, 4 decades.
And so this was something that you had been thinking about for a while when you put this website together. It's strictly college football, correct?
Well, it's college sports, and a couple years ago, I said I'd been at the LA Times for my entire adult life, essentially almost 40 years.
Sure.
So I figured that was a long time to be anywhere. So and then they offered a buyout, and I jumped at it. But I didn't want to stop writing. I was only 57 years old.
Oh yeah.
And so I wanted to continue writing, and I already had in the back of my mind, since I was doing a lot of this stuff anyway for the LA Times. Everything had become so interactive, multi-platform sort of stuff.
Yep.
That when you're also putting out a daily newspaper, I mean, it can really wear you down, the 24/7 thing. So I just plucked the stuff I liked from the print world, the features I like to do, and we decided with a couple other guys to kind of start our own college football website, tmgcollegesports.com, and the TMG is the media guides, and just keep busy. And we are a very low level subscription site with a pay model. It's basically $15 a year you can get it for. So it's not a
cheap.
It's cheap. We don't want to work for free, but we don't also want to. We also know that people don't want to pay for anything these days. So. But that was sort of the motivation, and we literally started from scratch. We're now in our second year, and then this year we added Tony Barnhart, which was a big get for us. And he's writing for us. He's one of the 4 pillars covering the South and the ACC and the SEC, and then we got Mark Blaudschen from the Boston Globe in the East, and we got Herb Gould, who has been at the Chicago Sun-Times all his life. And then me. So, 4 guys with like 150 years experience.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it's been fun. It's kept me busy, and I get to do the fun parts of the job I had, and I get to cut out the stuff I didn't like.
There you go.
A lot of,
do what you want. You don't be forced into a story.
I do what I want now.
That's right.
And I end up liking to do a lot of stuff, so it's been fun.
Well, do you if you were forced to or requested to write an article on whether or not you like the bowl system, Not necessarily the playoffs, but just the
Right.
bowl system, the whole craziness of like a million games and
Yeah.
silly matchups and all that other stuff. How would you respond to that?
I like it. I think it's I think 40 is probably too many.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like teams with not winning records in bowl games.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not a big fan of that.
no.
So some of these games I'm not, but some of those smaller games end up being the most exciting games. But I think we've reached a real tipping point here in how many bowls is enough.
Yep.
Number one. The other point is what are the purposes of bowls? Are they for the players or are they for ratings for ESPN, which obviously dominates, they own or operate most of the bowls.
Yep.
And then that brings into the question of, do I play in the bowl or not? Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey kind of pulled that one last year, and it's like, you know what? It is an interesting question. Do I risk my ACL for the Sun Bowl or the Cactus Bowl? Maybe not. But do I risk it for a playoff game or a Rose Bowl?
Yeah.
And that's the question that players are having to ask now. And that's a product of having so many bowls, because a lot of these bowls weren't around 15 or 20 years ago, so these players didn't have to make that decision. They weren't in a bowl.
I mean, I kind of also, when you have so many bowls, it kind of takes away from the tradition part of it. I mean, sure, you're always going to still love the Rose Bowl and even the Sugar and a few of those. But there's just no, I mean, that's the whole thing that you used to love about the bowls many years ago, was the tradition of it. And now you can't even keep count with the names and the sponsors and the locations, and it's just, it's confusing.
Right. And, McCaffrey got some grief last year for sitting out the Sun Bowl for Stanford. Well, you know what? He'd already played in a Rose Bowl the year before.
Yeah.
And he had a phenomenal game, one of the best Rose Bowl performances in history. And so why would he want to risk his draft status? And we're only talking about a select number of players that this affects. But in the game that McCaffrey played in last year in the Sun Bowl, his quarterback blew out his ACL, Keller Chris.
Yeah.
We saw it with Jake Butt, the tight end for Michigan.
Right.
Blew out his knee. I've seen it too many times, and I don't think it's up to us to decide what these guys should do, and I don't think anybody is a coward. But on the other hand, if you want to play and you need to play to enhance your status, or if you just want to play for your teammates, that's fine too. I think it should be a player decision, and we shouldn't criticize it.
No.
Any decision they make.
Matter of fact, the top game on Saturday, the Las Vegas Bowl, we've already seen such a situation with Royce Freeman deciding that he's not going to play. And Royce is, I guess, an interesting player to keep an eye on when because this is his last year, so he'll be in the draft, and it's possible he could be a second-round draft pick. A big guy, all-time leading rusher for the Ducks, but never. I don't know. I'm actually kind of surprised that with all the production that he's had in his career, he's kind of gone under the radar. Maybe that's a West Coast thing.
It is, but this game is a perfect example of what we're talking about. A player sits out of this game, and some might criticize him for that. For a team where the coach left after 1 year, bailed out on the team, Willie Taggart.
Yep.
Basically lied to his team and to recruits. So where's the loyalty there?
True.
So if a player wants to sit out, and Royce is an interesting case. I thought as a sophomore, earlier in his career, he was the closest thing on the West Coast to Leonard Fournette. I mean, he was a little mini Leonard Fournette a couple years ago. Last year, he had an off year. He got hurt. He got hurt in the Nebraska game early, and then Oregon's season went in the tank.
Yep.
And he sort of went in the tank too. I mean, he kind of didn't look like now I don't know if he was hurt or what was going on there. He didn't look like the same back. And then he kind of had a bounce back year this year. But again, the team fell apart because the quarterback got hurt, and they went through a real drought in the middle of the season, and Oregon kind of disappeared off the radar, and so did Royce Freeman. You know, it kind of went hand in hand. When he's healthy, and he's surrounded by Oregon type personnel, and the quarterback position is so critical at Oregon for the success of everyone else. He's a bull. I mean, he's an SEC type running back in the Pac-12. At least he was at his best.
Yep.
And so that's why he's an interesting case, I think, for the NFL.
Yeah, and not only now he's out, and I know that for Boise, now I didn't get an update today, but I know that two of their top playmakers on offense were dealing with injuries. Madison, the running back, their top running back, got hurt in the championship game, and Jake Rowe hasn't played. He didn't play in the championship game. So I haven't gotten an update on either of those guys playing because Boise does not have an explosive offense and cannot afford to have both of those guys miss the game, especially with Herbert back for Oregon.
Yeah.
And that's why Oregon is a touchdown favorite like they should be, but you just never know about Boise. Boise is just one of those schools that over the years always relishes this moment against Pac-12 teams.
They do, and they have historically. But this is the key to looking at all these bowl games is you've got to tell me who's playing first. You know, it's like who's in the game, who's out.
Yes.
Who's still the coach.
True.
What teams are playing with interim coaches? What's the motivation?
What's the motivation? Yes.
And that used to be when I picked for the LA Times, and I still pick my bowl games every year, but when I did it, it was always who wants to be there. And the Las Vegas Bowl is a great example because for many years it was a much more important game for the Mountain West team or whatever team they were playing.
Uh-huh.
And I would always pick that team. If UCLA was going to the Las Vegas Bowl, and I would always pick the team, Wyoming. So there's been these kind of upsets, Wyoming, and you're going to take the team that wants to beat the Pac-12 team. And Boise has long been in that kind of, even though they are an established program, obviously over the past decade, they still seem to still have a chip about playing. You know, a lot of people in Boise think they should be in the Pac-12. You know, honestly,
that's true.
Just geographically,
yeah.
There's no other. You know, it's never going to happen. And I try to tell San Diego State's never getting in the Pac-12. And San Jose State's never getting in the Pac-12. So what makes you think Boise?
Yeah.
Just because you have a good football team.
Yeah.
But there's all of those kind of motivations that go on. When you're facing a Pac-12 team, and in many cases with Boise this year, I'm not. They caught a huge break in the Mountain West title game when they got to host Fresno, which I thought was completely unfair because Fresno had just beat them in the regular season. And then I turned on the TV and I didn't even realize this. And I go, what are they playing there on the blue field? And, some funky, I don't know what happened. They used the standings from the previous week.
Yeah, which they were not supposed to. I don't know what they were thinking.
So wait a minute. So Boise kind of caught a break in being in this game, and
Fresno outplayed them. I mean, Boise was very fortunate because Fresno had they had 10 opportunities to put the game in the way in the second half. They had the ball in midfield 5 straight times. They couldn't pick up a couple first downs and put them away. And then you knew sooner or later when you do that, all the other teams got to do is hit 1 or 2 plays like Boise did, and then all of a sudden they were in Fresno field position, Fresno territory, and they were able to take the lead, and that was it.
Right. So when you're looking at this game, you're going, okay, what's the motivation? Well, Royce Freeman's not playing, but Justin Herbert is playing. Now, Justin Herbert, the story of Oregon since Marcus Mariota has been, and even with Marcus, I've never seen a team that completely it just becomes discombobulated when the quarterback goes out.
Yeah.
And it happened with Vernon Adams. When Oregon had Vernon Adams, they were a top 10 team. He was a dynamic. When he got hurt, they were the 120th best team in the country.
Yeah.
I've never seen a team that went. And same thing with Justin Herbert, really fine young player, homegrown product. They were one of my teams that I predicted. They were one of the 4 and 8s last year that I predicted would have big turnarounds because I really like this quarterback. And guess what? When he played, they were good.
Yes.
And when he was out, they were bad. And he's back now. So that's why I think Oregon should be a slight favorite in this game, because I think they are motivated. And the other key critical part of this was that even though that Willie Taggart bolted on them out of the blue, that they got the guy they wanted, Mario Cristobal.
That's true. Yeah.
So you have what's the motivation? The motivation for Oregon is, look, they signed a petition to back this guy Cristobal as their coach. So they got their way. Well, they better go out now and play for him.
Yep.
So
agreed.
Those are my bold. Those are the bold motivations when you're picking games. And so that's why I think Oregon is motivated to play in this game, and they will want to play well, and they have their best. Their quarterback is in the game.
Yeah, and that's exactly. It never hurts when you're picking games to take the team with the better quarterback. So because Boise, of course, Rippon we thought was going to have a good year, and then he had some of the injuries early on, and he's just never recovered. And of course, he's lost some talent from last year. He just doesn't have the same weapons that he had last year, and that's hurt him too. But fact is, look, it's Boise hasn't been in this spot too. Let's keep in mind, even though they're the program, the last couple of years they didn't even play in a Mountain West championship game. So
right.
So I think that was a big season for Brian Harsin, to tell you the truth. I think he needed this season.
It is, and I said they were fortunate to get in that championship game. They also blew a 21-point fourth quarter lead at Washington State earlier this year,
true.
which is very un-Boise-like, and so they have some warts. They're still solid, but I saw them a couple times, and it wasn't the same.
They're not. No.
What you remembered about the Boise teams of Chris Peterson were the defensive fronts, and they
dominating.
They stopped people.
Yes.
They stopped the run, and they were dominating defensive team in their conference, and they could stand up to many teams in the in the Power Five too.
Yeah, they're a good defensive team, but really just for the Mountain West. Get outside the Mountain West, like you said, they gave up 47 to Washington State, 42 to Kurt Bankert in Virginia. And I don't count BYU because they were playing. I
don't know what happened to that program.
That was not that typical year for them. And I will say this, because I'm going to ask you this. I might as well. I can throw this question in now, actually, because the player that one of the players that is like one of my really nice sleeper players that not a lot of people know about because they play in the West Coast, because he plays on Boise, is that linebacker Leighton Vander Esch for Boise State. I mean, I like that kid. Now, I don't know what kind of pro potential he has, but he's one of those lunch pail throwback linebackers that you love watching. And if fans haven't seen him yet, hopefully they'll enjoy his performance today, because he's the leader of that defense.
Yeah, this is what and I would follow. I didn't follow them as closely this year because when they kind of fall off the map nationally, I kind of follow. But when they were rolling, I really studied them. I went up there a few times and did stories on them. But what I loved what they did, and what Chris Peterson did for many years, is they would come into California, Southern California, where I'm based, and they would they'd go to games where Pac-12 schools are recruiting. The famous one is I'm blanking on his name now. Ian Johnson, right? The running back. Is that the guy that proposed in the Fiesta Bowl?
Okay. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about, of course.
Okay, so this was the Rancho Cucamonga versus Damien is where Ian Johnson went.
Yep.
And so they're Boise State. Everyone else is coming to the game to see Patrick Chung, who was a star at Rancho Cucamonga, who's now went to Oregon and now New England Patriots. Really great. And so Boise goes there and they see Ian Johnson. They see the running back on the other team. They come in and they'll take safeties, and then they'll become in 3 years they're like stand-up defensive ends.
Right.
So that's what they really did, because they knew they weren't going to be able to get the cream players out of Southern California, but they found the guys and they could build them up.
Yes.
in 3 or 4 years into really all conference type players.
Yeah, they had some really good coaches, and like you said, they did a really good job of finding the right spots for personnel. And I know I remember when Shiano was building Rutgers, me being from New Jersey and following that their ascent. What he used to do is he used to go out and he would play like his guys that would normally be linebackers for a regular power team, he would be playing defensive end. And just like you said, if normal safeties would be playing linebacker and so forth, and you would want to do that because he'd want to get as much team speed as he possibly could.
Right.
And of course he'd blitz the hell out of you too. So
you have to do that.
You have to do that. You have to have you have to have a really smart coach that understands what your limitations are in recruiting and figure out a way to make it work for you. So it sounds like you like Oregon then in the game.
I do like Oregon. Like I said, there's so many little fluctuating factors there. Who's playing, who's not, who's the coach, who's the not, but who's not playing. But in this case, I think the interim coach became the permanent coach, which was a positive.
Yes.
And then the quarterback is playing at a high level, and the running back's out, but they still have other talented players.
Yeah, they do.
Said Boise is offensively, like you said, is just not. And defensively, they're just a step below what they've been in the past decade.
Yeah, and Oregon also hasn't won a bowl game in a few years, so they are. Matter of fact, there's probably a lot of kids, most of the kids on the team right now that have never won a bowl game. So that counts as well. By the way, keep in mind Boise, when they went to the Las Vegas Bowl from 2010 to 2012, of course that was a different time for them. They won 3 straight over Pac-12 teams.
Yeah.
So that was the time that they were beating up on all those Big 12 teams, and that was a different time for Boise.
Different time, right?
Yep. All right. So as far as the other games, there's 5 games in total on Saturday. Which game outside, of course, the Las Vegas Bowl would intrigue you the most if you could only pick one game to watch?
Well, I'm gonna say New Orleans Bowl.
Oh, okay.
Look, Troy. I watched most of the game, and Troy beat LSU this year.
That's
in
true.
Baton Rouge.
Yep.
And they didn't just beat them; they beat up on them. In fact, half the crowd left in the fourth quarter, and then LSU made a late rally. It got it back to an onside kick, but the game was effectively over. The fans given up. North Texas is. It's weird. I've seen them play. I saw them play against Army, and won on a last second field goal.
Yeah, Seth Luttrell's doing a nice job there. He's building something.
Absolutely.
Yep.
They got a good quarterback. They got so that's one of those games that could be, you look at it and go, well, but that could be a 45-40 thriller,
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the top game myself. I'd pick that one too, and also because you're looking at two teams that were really like two of the best teams of their conferences as well.
Yeah, and I'm gonna and I'd be lying to say that I'm gonna be watching every second of all these
sure.
games. Getting back to what we talked about before, there are too many of these games.
Yeah.
The Cure Bowl. Am I gonna really sit down and devote 3.5-4 hours to Georgia State, Western Kentucky, teams that are a combined 12 and 11? No.
Yeah, no.
But the TV will be on, and I'll be I'll be doing other things. I'll be at I'm actually going to be at a wedding Saturday. So if TV's on somewhere, I'll be watching that. But yeah, this is the later you get in the bowl season is that when I start devoting, we start devoting serious time.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's also when you get hopefully you also get a pattern of what's going on, and
right.
And because sometimes I do find it interesting that the dogs seem to do a really good job every year in the bowl games. I don't know why, but maybe it's just because, again, motivation. It always seems like the underdog seems to be motivated more than the favorite.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but it does happen. It seems like a decent percentage of
Right.
times. So
Okay.
do you have like like if you were gonna pick like one team out there during this bowl season, you look and you go, as far as a dog, and you go, yeah, I really like that dog. I really like that team. That
Yeah, I was looking. I've been looking over the last few days, and I don't see that. You could say probably the biggest one out there is you know, m- Central Florida against Auburn, and Central Florida
in a big
an under,
game, yep.
but they're undefeated, but they're the underdog against them.
But they are an underdog, 10 points, and no coach. Scott Frost's gone.
Although he's coach, but he is coaching in the game.
Yeah, that's true. That's what do you
Um,
think about that? Do you think that is going? Do you think that's when you see those situations happen? What do you have you noticed one way or another if that is a positive?
this is a very unusual situation because usually the school does not allow that to happen. Either the school that's losing the coach or the school that's getting the coach. This is a unique situation. I think it's a special circumstance because of the nature of the program. And this is, Central Florida was winless a couple years ago, and so
And they're
nobody is.
undefeated. That's huge. You're
Yeah,
undefeated as a head coach. It's kind of hard to walk away from that.
right, but nobody is going to see it again. It's like most coaches, you think Florida State's going to let Jimbo Fisher coach in the bowl? No way.
Yeah.
But Scott Frost is turned a program around into an undefeated season. He did everything he was supposed to do, and then his alma mater is calling him home.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Special circumstance. No one's going to blame him for
Nope.
taking the Nebraska job. So
Nope.
in this case, I think it's okay for him to complete or try to complete this magical season.
Yeah, I agree.
But this is a rarity. So that's a different factor. Yes, interim coach, but interim coach or the coach left, but he's trying. I think the players will be totally committed to finishing what they started with Scott. And the problem is they're going against a team that has is flawed somewhat, but also a team that has beaten two teams in the playoff and lost to the other one. Auburn has
Sure.
beaten Alabama and Georgia,
Yep.
and lost a very close game to Clemson. That's tough to overcome. I don't care what your record is. I'm picking Auburn in that game.
Yeah, you would think that Auburn is probably going to more than likely just absolutely like run all over them. I mean, I can't imagine Central Florida is going to do anything to stop their running game. So it's just a matter of, turnovers. Is Auburn going to kind of look at this game as, well, we were one win away from playing in the playoffs, and we just got through playing Alabama and Georgia and all of that, and this is a letdown game, and who cares
Right.
about Central Florida? So there is that.
There is that. This is a heart game versus a head game. The heart wants Central Florida, and I think that's the good story, and I would have no problem with. I would root for that to happen. The head says, Kerryon Johnson has been.
If he's healthy, yes.
If he's healthy, and they can probably just run all over. Now, again, that's what is Auburn's motivation. That's the critical thing, and that's why Central Florida has a chance. And everybody's going to be rooting for the underdog in this one, and I do think they have a chance. So, but I look at just physically in games like this, and Auburn is such a run-based physical team that if Kerryon is healthy, then they can control the game.
No, Auburn will run for like 300-400 yards, and their defense should be able to stop them. But again, that's if your defense, you have a month off. If your defense, it's all about physicality and desire. And if the desire is not there, and if you're off for whatever reason because you're just not mentally into it because of the 3 weeks off, and again, what we talked about, no motivation, that definitely can hurt a defense. And then if you don't hit your assignments with that offense, then Central Florida can break open into some really big plays, and we could have ourselves, a 51-45 game.
What we could have is a repeat of the Sugar Bowl a few years ago when Utah beat Alabama. Kyle, and that was an undefeated Utah team.
Yes.
highly motivated against an Alabama team is, oh, we should have been, what are we doing here? Well, we got to play these guys. That's what can happen,
Yep.
And that's what we'll be looking for to see how Auburn, what's their body language.
Yeah.
Pregame
warm-up. That's true. A couple of dogs I do like. I do like USC in the Cotton Bowl, and I do like.
But that's I don't even consider USC an underdog.
Well,
but I
know.
They are.
But they are. They're a touchdown underdog. I mean, that's why I like them. I mean, come on. I'm a touchdown underdog here. I think they're a better team. So, at least right now, I think they're a better team. And I also, tell you the truth, I also like Miami in the Orange Bowl to rebound after what happened. Clemson is just, I mean, they're just so bad to watch offensively. And I'm a big Mark Richt fan, and it's a home game for them. And I just think that that's a possibility there. But anyway, I like USC. I think USC is they seem to be playing a lot better at the end of the season the last 2 years than they have in the beginning of seasons.
Correct.
Could be Sam Darnold's last game.
Yeah, there were a lot of mitigating factors for USC, which get lost, and they're excuses, and so whatever. But when they lost at Washington State, three of their starting offensive linemen were out in that game.
They had injuries. Yep.
Starting wide receiver did not play. Starting Porter Gustin did not play, and lost a close game. And then Notre Dame had a bye week to prepare for USC, and USC was still just battered, and I saw that coming a mile away. And that loss really hurt them visually because it was Notre Dame, and it was on national TV, and it really sunk USC in the eyes of the national media. And it's the reason they finished number 8 in the the final college football ranking. But USC, when Darnold is clicking, and he's playing much better now. They've added Ronald Jones is a kind of an under the radar star back. Stephen Carr, who's a true freshman running back, who's the next star, was hurt most of the season. He's back. It's hard to imagine USC being a 7-point underdog, and USC is, I think, pretty motivated. They have you look at 18, 19-year-old kids, they probably feel snubbed. That Ohio State was the 2-loss team being considered for the playoff.
Sure.
Not USC. Why? You have to answer your question. Why was Ohio State the 2-loss team that almost made the playoff? And USC was never even in the discussion. USC had a better schedule. I mean, strength of schedule. USC had, they didn't. Both teams had equally poor, horrific road losses, but USC's was to Notre Dame, which still. Until the very end, was in the top 15. So
bias, you know how it is.
Well,
Ohio State.
That's your motivation, right?
You should be, absolutely. Let's show them,
right?
And also, in a lot of games with Ohio State too, that they're able to win games and beat up teams. They have, especially when they have the edge of quarterback, but they're not going to have the edge of quarterback here. And without the edge of quarterback. Then that's another reason that I think USC is not a bad idea. Now, what's interesting about the game is that this is basically what would have been the Rose Bowl, and so I kind of find it funny because neither team has ever played in the Cotton Bowl before, and I think it's kind of funny because you hear everybody talk about how it's going to be hard to have a playoff system outside of 4 teams, and one of the reasons is because the Rose Bowl. They don't want to ruin the Rose Bowl situation, the Big Ten, the Pac-12. They want the Rose Bowl and all that. It's like, okay, well, you wanted the Rose Bowl. Well, where's the Rose Bowl? I mean, they're playing in the Cotton Bowl, and you have a 14 playoff. So I'm not sure even that excuse makes any sense anymore. I mean, because to tell you the truth, I'm even a little bit. I don't like that. I mean, even if there was an 8 or a 4, I don't care how many playoffs teams there are, but I just don't like it when I mean, I think this might be the first time ever that there isn't either a Big Ten or a Pac-12 team playing in the Rose Bowl. I believe it's possible. I looked at all the Rose Bowl games over years and I couldn't find them. I found sometimes one team in and one team out, but I don't think I've ever seen a Rose Bowl without either a Big Ten or a Pac-12 team.
It has happened. remember in the BCS system where the Rose Bowl got to host the national title game every 4 years. So Miami, Nebraska was a Rose Bowl.
Yeah, so Nebraska was a Big 12 team back then.
Correct.
Okay.
Texas and Michigan. Vince Young's great Rose Bowl.
Texas and USC. Well, there you have the one Pac-12 team, but
the Michigan, Texas, Michigan. But yeah, it's you make a.
But that was the one, Miami and Nebraska. Yeah, I remember that one.
Well, and then Alabama, Texas. That was a national title game in the Rose Bowl.
Okay.
Saban's first at Alabama, 2009. But your point is about Ohio State and USC in a Cotton Bowl. There are 2 Rose Bowls being played outside the Rose Bowl. The Fiesta Bowl is a Rose Bowl. You've got Penn State and Washington. So
that's true.
It's a double Rose Bowl outside the Rose Bowl.
Yes.
The only saving grace in this scenario is that the Rose Bowl is a tremendous matchup against schools, which I found this a shocking fact that I've never played before, in Georgia and Oklahoma, which is confounding to me, I guess.
Sure.
But I guess you realize for 100 years how regionally segregated all these conferences and leagues were, and there was very little, interconference kind of play or bowl matchups were either, there were not that many bowls for a long time, and so the chances of them playing a bowl game were slim. But that's a pretty good game. If you're going to lose 2 Rose Bowls, that's probably the game you want to lose. You can say, okay, well, we got the Heisman Trophy winner. We've got Georgia playing in its first Rose Bowl since 1943. 2 schools that have never met. That's pretty good, but it's still not a Rose Bowl.
It's weird. It doesn't feel like a Rose Bowl. It's a playoff game. I mean, They can put Rose Bowl all over it all they want, but Georgia, Oklahoma, Rose Bowl? No, this is a playoff game.
I'm close to the Rose Bowl. I'm close to the people that run it. When they joined the BCS in 1998, that was the end of the Rose Bowl, and they all knew it. They sold a piece of their soul. But what they had, it was up to them to finalize this whatever consolidation of a mishmash of a championship. If there was ever going to be a 4-team playoff as we have now, the Rose Bowl had to get into the BCS in 1998, and the price they paid for that is all the things we're talking about now.
Yep.
But they had, if they wanted to be part of a system, by the way, that has generated millions and millions and millions of dollars since 1998, that they had to sell part of their soul, and this is part of the price you pay for that.
Now, I've already gone on the record that I am going to be taking Georgia to win the national championship. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take the winner of the Rose Bowl to win the national championship, but I am going with Georgia. And I think it's going to be, as far as the Sugar Bowl, I don't know. I mean, I like Clemson in that game. I kind of find it humorous that Alabama just squeaked into the playoffs and they're the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing from Vegas's point of view, which I just think is funny. I mean, they barely got in Alabama, and they're the favorite to win the whole thing.
Has Vegas ever loved a team more than it loves Alabama?
Than Alabama, correct.
They love to match Alabama against the Green Bay Packers. And if they play, and that's I love that argument. And that was the argument on that Saturday. Well, who would if they had to play today? Who would Vegas have in this game? Well, Vegas is always going to have Alabama.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
No, that shouldn't be a criteria at all for who goes into the playoffs. So, but yeah, who do you like? Have you made a decision yet?
I have. I've picked my games. I disagree with you on the Rose Bowl.
You like Baker Mayfield and the Sooners?
The Baker factor.
Okay.
Best player in the game. It's on Oklahoma. Edge Oklahoma, and not to say Georgia can't do it, but Georgia has a freshman quarterback, and I'll go with quarterback play.
Okay.
The position and Oklahoma's defense, which was horrific for much of the year.
Yeah, they're playing better.
They're playing better.
Yeah.
And the fear, of course, is that the Georgia running backs will just run all over them all day, all night. That is, that's the hesitation with Oklahoma. But Oklahoma is so explosive. I think they can win a shootout, given that they're going to give up ground and points.
Yeah, there'll be points in that game, yes.
Yeah.
And Rodney Anderson, I tell you what, boy, is that kid come on in the second half of the season.
And now that he's been cleared of certain charges,
that was important because Oklahoma ain't winning nothing without Rodney Anderson. It can't be Big Mayfield can't do it himself, so he needs help.
And it's amazing all the other factors you have to look into.
Sure.
Allegations cleared.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, where's his head at? Where are these guys' heads at?
Well, that's another part of the whole bowl season
yeah.
is you got to worry about suspensions, and that's coming. We always get suspensions between now and 2 or 3 weeks. The kids get in trouble.
Absolutely. Bowl. The night before the bowl game.
Yes.
You'll have 3 guys that are. Wait a minute. I want to change my pick now.
Yeah, it's too late.
It happens all the time. And your other game. Alabama a month ago. Look, Alabama was an interesting story this year because they ended up in Sagarin. Sagarin ratings is the 56th best schedule in the country, which seems impossible for a team
in the SEC
West, which was
that's right,
which is considered by many, including Sagarin,
the
best division. So how can you be in the best division and have that 56th best schedule? And you played Florida State. Well, we also played Mercer, but it's confounding to me because I didn't know how good they were. They were wiping people out.
It was hard to tell. Sure. Mm-hmm.
Ole Miss, Arkansas, Vanderbilt. Okay, and then last. Mississippi State, they did not look good in that game. And it wasn't just that they were the way they played. They made un-Alabama-like mistakes.
Oh, and they didn't play good run defense. And
no.
I think that was, the first game maybe that Deion Hamilton missed? Was that it, I think?
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that Alabama is 3 deep everywhere.
Yep.
But they had a lot of injuries. And
yes.
It started to impact their depth, which, if and that's what happened to USC, except USC didn't have the kind of depth that Alabama has to plug those holes. But the attrition factor for Alabama started to wear them down. They did not look good against Mississippi State, a team that, by the way, ended up losing to Ole Miss a couple weeks later. Ole Miss, which was one of the worst Ole Miss teams in recent history. The Cal beat Ole Miss. Everybody beat Ole Miss this year.
Yeah. I think it was a bad year for Alabama to have the injuries because 3 years ago, 2 years ago, they're fine. But they've had so many defections early from all of that depth that they just couldn't afford. There's just the kids that were now on the second and third on the depth chart were just too young. They just weren't ready like the other guys who have been over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and I think that's true, and that's why I'm picking Clemson.
Yep.
To
Me
win
too. I like Clemson
because of the way Alabama looked the last, and the fact that Clemson obviously stood up to Alabama in the last 2 national title games that could have gone either one of those games could have gone the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama could have won both of them. Clemson could have won both of them. They ended up splitting. So Clemson is not. Is a big boy program,
yes.
and what they did to Miami was had to be it was kind of eye raising, and I have no problem thinking that they can win that game.
And then who do you like between Clemson and Oklahoma?
Well, I for the purposes of just picking, I'm going with the Baker, the Baker Mayfield story, and I think I said 42-40 or something like that, some wild, crazy.
It would
game,
be if they played. Yes, I would expect just like last year. I would expect the same type of. Yeah, that's right.
Comes down to last.
They're going to score. It's college. These kids are going to score. You'd have to have like a an Alabama defense from what was it? I forget what year it was, like 6 years ago when they won that national championship, and they were like unbelievable. You don't have a defense like that nowadays. You can have a good defense, you're still giving up 28 against a really good offense.
Yeah, I like what's happened to Oklahoma the last few weeks, and maybe it was the aftermath of Kansas, that debacle, which Baker Mayfield made a fool of himself, and you know they kind of were playing against everybody because everyone hated them and hated Baker and so I saw a resolve, and like I said, even the defense got better. They seem to be rallying around for whatever. Not that Oklahoma it has to rally, it needs motivation but inspiration. But these kids do, and and Baker is playing at a very high level, and he's one of those kind of guys that in a matchup against Kelly Bryant, I'm going to take the best player on the field. And if that's the quarterback, then that's slight advantage Oklahoma.
Well, I've said on this network for about good 6 weeks now, as a long-suffering Jet fan, that's who I want. I want Baker Mayfield, and part of the reason why I feel confident about not only wanting him but getting him is because if the Jets end up with, like right now, the 9th or 10th pick, they're not even going to have to move in order to get him, because he's not going to go earlier than that. And
right, he doesn't fit a lot of those combine things that those guys they'll tape measure him, and they'll go, well, he's not this, he's not that.
That's right.
Well, either was Drew Brees,
True.
But Baker has that kind of Russell Wilson,
Yeah, sure. And I see that too. I see that he's one of the guys that can break that mold. And very rarely do you break it, but I think he's got the chops to do it.
Yeah, if you're short, you have problems in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. But the way you get around that is being able to find passing lanes because you can move in the pocket.
Yes, very athletic. Yes.
Drew Brees can find lanes. Russell Wilson can find lanes with his feet, not necessarily as a runner, but as a guy that can buy time in the pocket and escape in the pocket without having to run and risk life and limb, and then find the open guy. Baker can do. He has that kind of potential.
Yep.
And he's obviously a competitive person.
Yeah, and that's also part of the reason why I'm all gung ho for him, because being in New York, I think that he can handle it, and I think that it would be it could be a negative in a way, but if it's a positive in any way, shape, or form, then it's like the best of both worlds, and you've got yourself the franchise for the next decade.
Yes, and there's different kind of problems that you look for in players, and if it's Johnny Manziel had a different set of issues, and whatever you call it, if you have a drinking problem or you have that kind of problem, that's different than competitive problems and temperamental problems, I think. Although that was a huge factor with someone like Ryan Leaf, who was basically a baby,
that's immature. That's immaturity.
Yeah, it's immaturity. That's not competitiveness.
True.
But it should. I mean, what Baker did, it should have raised alarms because he was wasting his time with Kansas. But I look at his temper in different ways, as a competitive temper, and that's and the other factor is he's not going to be impacted by his signing bonus. And you look historically about players who, once they sign, they get the money, direct deposited into their account. What happens to them then? I saw it with Matt Leinart. You see it with certain guys. I mean, there's these kind of guys that once they get the money, what's their motivation?
Yeah, they don't have a desire.
Matt Leinart didn't put in the work in the NFL. He'll tell you.
Yeah.
Vince Young, once they got the money, and then what happened to them? There are other guys that would play for $10, and they're not going to change the way they play. And I think Baker Mayfield is in that category, and it's not his bank account will not impact the way he plays. So that's, I think, a positive.
Well, that's also why, as I said, I mean, I'm going because both Georgia and Oklahoma are the two equal, I guess, if you want to call long shots. They're the dogs of the playoffs. Alabama, Clemson are the two favorites. Georgia, Oklahoma are the two dogs, and I just don't see it that way. I think this is extremely evenly matched all across the board. But I do like I do think if Oklahoma beats Georgia that would be all I would need to know that for Baker Mayfield to go ahead and take care of the next obstacle. And then for Georgia, if they beat Oklahoma after winning the SEC championship game, I kind of really feel that they'll be on a nice little roll as well. So I'm going to go with the winner of the Rose Bowl, but I am leaning towards Georgia at this point in time, and I'll be rooting for Baker hopefully soon enough. Hopefully he'll be wearing green and white in a few months, and but Lincoln Riley is building something nice there anyway. You know, he's going to have Kyler Murray back next year, so a different type of quarterback, but still the offense probably won't be too much of a problem with Anderson and Murray in the backfield next year for the Sooners.
Right. I think that program is up and running, and will sustain for the foreseeable future.
All right, Chris, I appreciate your time here. Hey, look, you know, we got about a month to go before the playoffs and then even the championship game. So hopefully at one point before the season is really put to bed, before somebody's crowned a champion, I'll get an opportunity to speak with you again and look back at maybe some of these big games and maybe even the semifinals. And hopefully we'll chat again before it's all said and done.
Anytime, we can look back and see how wrong we were.
Yeah.
I missed that Camellia Bowl. I know.
Yeah. Well, that's
see that coming.
As long as we get the playoffs, right?
That's right.
Thanks.
Right. Post Christmas Bowl.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
You got it.
Okay. Take care. All right. That's Chris Dufresne. And again, you can check out his website at tmgcollegesports.com. That's the media guides. And good to have Chris on for the first time. By the way, speaking of the Las Vegas Bowl, just so you know, we have a show that's available on demand right now from yesterday. Rob Mosley, editor for GoDucks.com, joined me. He was live from Nevada, site of the game, which is tomorrow if you're listening live. So he covers, of course, Oregon Ducks football. So got an opportunity to talk to Chris about the game, but to Rob, about the game, but definitely zeroing in on the Oregon Ducks. So again, that is available on demand. Now coming up a little bit later on today, again, if you're listening live, we have one more show today before the bowl season begins. We're also going to be posting bowl reports. Jeff Shane, one of our contributors, is going to be putting together some bowl previews. We'll be posting that over at ourlads.com. And I will also be posting a college football report before tomorrow's games. But coming up at 3 o'clock today, we're going to talk CUSA and Sunbelt football from 3 to 4 with Cyrus Smith and Adam Luckett, both from SBNation.com, covering both of those conferences. A lot of matchups between Conference USA and Sunbelt this weekend and the first week of the bowl season. So, matter of fact, there were three straight up matchups. And Conference USA is going to be in action in 6 additional bowl games. Sunbelt in, 2 additional games. So a lot of teams to discuss from 3 to 4. And that'll be on the meeting room, once again, with Cyrus Smith and Adam Luckett from SBNation.com. So that'll wrap it up here for our lads, for our meeting room show for this Friday. One of our meeting room shows for this Friday, the 15th of December, 2017. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Once again, thanks to Chris Dufresne and Greg DePalma, and we'll see you next time.